Today I thought I would share with you how I Kitchener stitch or graft the toes of my socks. You can also use this technique if you are doing an afterthought or forethought heel where you need to graft your stitches together. That is not what I did in these socks. These are a short row heel, but my toes here, I did graft the last 2 rows of stitches together, and I thought I would just share with you what has worked for me. So I have this sock here that has 8 stitches on each needle. I have knit these socks on 9-inch circulars, but when I get to the toe decrease sections, I switch to magic loop. And I have divided up my instep stitches and sole stitches in half. So there are 8 stitches on each needle. The number of stitches you have remaining may differ depending on the pattern you're using or just based on your personal preference. This is the yarn that I have remaining. There's maybe 1 gram left. And how I estimate how much I need to do a Kitchener stitch is I measure 4 times the length of how many stitches are left. So there's 1, 2, and then 3, 4. And then I will cut my yarn there. Then I will get my yarn needle and thread that through. I will move my stitches up to closer to the tips of my needles, and the working yarn is right now on the back right stitch. And the way I remember how to do the Kitchener is I take a look at what stitches are facing me. So on the front needle, I have knit stitches facing me. And on the back needle, I'm looking at the wrong side or the inside of the sock, and I have purl stitches facing me. And I skip the setup round that a lot of Kitchener stitch grafting techniques have you do. And for me, that seems to get rid of any like funny loops that might end up at each side of the toe. So here we go. I'm going to insert as if to knit on that first stitch because the knit side is facing me, and that will go off. So knit off, and then the next stitch on that same needle, purl on. I'm going to do the back stitch. The purl stitches are facing me or the wrong side, so I'm going to insert as if to purl, purl off, next stitch, knit on. So the way I remember is whatever stitches are facing me, that's the direction of my needle first, and that stitch goes off. Then the second stitch on that same needle is the opposite, and then that stays on. So now we're back to the front needle, as if to knit, off, purl, on. Now back stitch, purl off, knit, on. And if you see here, I do that in like one motion. So I'm not going to pull my needle all the way through when I'm doing that off, just to kind of get me in the same rhythm, like so that I remember, okay, this is the needle that I'm working on, and it's kind of one step, even though it's 2. So I'm just going to keep going until I finish going, finish going through all of these stitches. Now, what you just saw happen there with the oops was that my yarn ended up on top of the needle, creating kind of an extra something there that I didn't want. So you want to make sure your working yarn stays below your needles. We're almost done here. And I give my yarn a tug in between each one, not too tight, but just so it snugs it up a little. And then after you go through that last stitch on each needle, your needle can come off. So here's my last one, purl off, knit on. So I give that a tug, and now I have finished grafting my stitches together. And sometimes there will be that last stitch will be kind of a loose loop at the end. So I'm going to stick my hand in my sock. And I should have had a slightly longer tail to weave in, but I didn't, so we're just going to work with it. So what I'm going to do to get rid of that little loop there is I'm going to go back in to my stitches and maybe just come out the other side, but it'll hopefully just tuck it in. And then when I weave in my tail, I actually like to just duplicate stitch over the stitches that I just grafted, because I find it gives it a little extra reinforcement. All right, so now that I have woven in that end, I just kind of get these stitches to settle in a little by tugging on it just a little bit. So here is my grafted toe, and this loop is, if it's still kind of being a little stubborn and sticking out, what I will do is stick my hand in there, find where that loose stitch is from the inside, and just give that a little tug to snug it up on the inside. And then after I block, everything will just even out. And turn it again, and there we go. So that is how I Kitchener stitch or graft my sock toes. Here are the two. Hope that helps.